Hi, I'm Hugh Whitmore, and welcome to installment 4 of Hugh Writes a Novel. That's 8 weeks now working on the Three Madelines Book 4. It's been fun, it's been exciting. I love writing, and I hope you do too. When you're writing your novel, it's an exciting way to spend the day and spend your time and your energy. It's an emotional journey. It's an intellectual exercise. It's also a creative exercise, and it's a great way to make a living if you can do it. And even if you're working towards making a living, it's fun. It's a little difficult at that point, but it's a great thing, and I really hope I'm encouraging you to stick with your novel writing, get good at it, and take it where you want it to go. So in the last 2 weeks, I wasn't as productive as I was in the first 3 2-week periods. I came up with 8,656 words, and the total now, after taking out some notes for the book, is 39,145. So I'm getting along in a 55 to 58,000 word book. So I'm doing okay, but as a matter of fact, I was having too much fun, and I got away from being professional. And let me explain. 2 things happened. One is I went back to do a read through, and that took up some time as well. That could take up a good part of a day. And I realized that I'd gone back to the beginning, and I realized that I had not fulfilled one of my promises, and you must fulfill all promises in your novel. And what I mean by that is this. If it's in 2 ways. One is if somebody says something in the beginning of the novel that's going to happen, or you put it in there for foreshadowing or to direct the reader to think about something that'll happen later, and then it turns out it doesn't happen. And this could be possible. You could choose a different path, or like I did, I ran out of time. I needed to condense, so I had to go back and write that out. Again, this happens in novel writing because as you go along, the story becomes apparent to you. It grows and twists and turns, and you find out, oh wow, this one character turned out to be very strong, so I can write about that character, and maybe that character wasn't talked about in the beginning. You need to go back and play up that character a little bit early on. Well, I made a promise about something that was going to happen, and I had to write it back out because I ran out of space for it. The other thing is, there are promises, but there are also everything must in your novel feed the plot. You can't make idle promises either. So there's specific promises, but you can't make idle promises, and you can't put things in there just like talking about a dreamy day that has nothing to do with the plot, or talking about a quirky thing of your character or one of your side characters that doesn't come to fruition. You must feed the plot. So stick with that. Don't make any idle promises, and don't make any write any dialogue or narrative about something that isn't going to happen. That's also a promise you don't want to break in your novel, because you always must feed your plot. So the other thing I did is I got going into plot point number 7, which is story structure point number 7. And just to recap, I use a 10-point story structure. You can look up on my YouTube channel for my story structure lectures. I have a one for beginners that's just 3 plot points of story structure. And I have one called Story Structure for Teachers that's 10 points, which I use, which I think is a compromise. There are some people who use as many as 18, but I think that's too broad, and 10 covers it for most authors. And so I got through the big 3, which is numbers 5, 6, and 7, where number 5 is where the main character gets into the new world. It's fun and games in the new world, number 5. Number 6 is the middle of the book, where there's a false victory. It looks great. Everything looks rosy. The action's going up. And then we get to plot point number 7, where everything's going down. And that's what I'm working on now. And what I did is, like I said, I got a little unprofessional. I was so excited and having so much fun. I was writing bigger scenes and more chapters, and I suddenly added up the words, and it was too much. And so I had to go back and reshape the entire, what would that be, third quarter of the book. And that's another reason why I only got a little under 8,700 words instead of, usually I would go about 1,000 a day, so 12 to 14,000 in 2 weeks. So I'm still in the process of doing that. And when you find yourself in this trouble, you have to learn to condense time in your novel. You don't always have to do this. Condensing time comes when you need to jump forward. Like if you're writing about something that happens in one day, you may have to jump forward an hour and describe that in just a couple of sentences. Or if you're writing about something that happens in a month, you might have to condense a couple of days or a whole week. I'm writing about something that takes place over 2 months, and I originally said it was going to happen over 3 months, and that's what I got into trouble over. I started to draw out this 3-month period and realized this book's going to be too long. It's going to be 80,000 words, which is too much for a middle grade novel. So I had to go back and shorten it. It took a lot of time. But again, these things will happen in your novel. You may get excited. You may get off to writing. Keep a cool head. Go back and reread often. Look at your beginning, or go back and read the last few chapters. Take that time and count that into the time that you know you're going to be working on your novel, because it will take some time. And that's why it takes me about 4 months usually to write a novel, because there's a lot of time. If it was just 1,000 words a day, that's 40 days. But it takes time. So, I'm sorry, that would be 50 days, excuse me. But it takes time, and you have to go back and read. You make mistakes, you have to rewrite, and then you have the editing, which is a lot of time too. So we'll get to that. Another thing is that as your novel draws on, you're going to have characters, and you're going to be fleshing them out, and the characters will be growing. And like I said, you might have a character that was just going to be in the background that pops up because you really found some interesting things to say to draw your reader in and feed the plot along in the journey of your main character. And you have to learn to juggle characters and write about them in a succinct way and keep it down. Otherwise, your novel will get too long too. And I'm sorry, I forgot a point about condensing time. Condensing time can take place usually takes place, in the mind of your main character. So if the action is upward, like in plot point 5 and story structure point 5, they might be thinking about, wow, things are going so great, I couldn't believe it. 2 weeks ago I was broke and now I got this job, or a month ago I was lonely and now I have this love interest, or whatever your novel is. And if the action's falling, which is the case in plot point 7, I wrote in some things that were kind of pleasant, and I shouldn't do that. It should all be downhill. And so I had to write those out. And when you're condensing, then maybe in the mind of your main character, they're talking about, wow, 2 weeks ago everything was great, now everything's going downhill, and I'm such a loser, and boy, it's all coming back to me, and I'm losing my mojo. And so you have to condense time, usually in the mind of your main character. So again, I'm having a good time. I sort of tripped up by having too much fun, and you might do that too. And just be easy on yourself when you're writing your novel. It's supposed to be fun. It can be frustrating with a novel because of how much time it takes. Your mind works very fast, but the keyboard is slower, reading is slower. Your mind probably works at, I don't know, it'd be interesting to know what scientists say about this, but I'll bet your mind works at 500 or 1,000 words a minute. Bang, things come into your mind, right? But you read maybe 150 to 200 words a minute, you type, 40 to 80 words a minute, depending on how good you are. So it's slower to write than it is to think, and it's slower to read than it is to write, and all these things take time. And just be a professional, be encouraged, work hard in your novel, and take for granted that these things will take time, and keep the creative juices flowing. And remember that the mind is the thing that writes the novel, and the heart and the emotions, and those work quickly. And get those ideas down, and then take the time, be a professional, and get it all done, and get your novel done. And as I'll be getting mine done over the next, we're up to 40,000, 50, maybe a month, I guess. And I'll check back in 2 weeks, and hopefully I'll have another good, positive report.